GTA 5 has been released at least 5 times. It was first released for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 back in 2013 in its version 1.00 and then was re-released with several improvements and additions in 2014 for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. The legacy version for computer was released in 2015 with few improvements compared to the PS4 version. In 2022, we got a new version of GTA 5, which is the GTA 5 expanded and enhanced for PS5. And finally, in 2025, this same expanded and enhanced version was released in March 2025. With some additional improvements compared to the version released for PS5 in 2022. About a year ago, I brought some videos showing all the differences from GTA 5 on PlayStation 3 to the PlayStation 4 version, which brings many absurd differences that probably many people didn't notice, and then I brought another one with all the differences from PS4 to PS5. The idea of this video is to be a comparison as well, but with all the differences from the first version of GTA 5, which would be 1.00 on the PS3, to the latest version released, which is the expanded and improved version for PC in 2025. I will try to make the video as complete and detailed as possible, showing everything that Rockstar has been able to enhance over these 12 years. Many things were already added in the PS4 version, others are only available from the PS5 version onwards and in the latest PC version. If you already know the channel, leave a like and subscribe right at the beginning of this video. If you don't know it yet, watch this video until the end, and if you like it, give it a like to support. That being said, let's get started. The first difference we have, which I believe is the one everyone noticed right away, is the graphics. But before getting into this first topic, I want to make it clear that all scenes recorded in the PS3 version were done with an emulator in version 1.00 without improvements. I could simply go on the internet and grab scenes from old videos of people playing on the PS3, but I think it's much better to show what I myself found and recorded. And in the graphics comparison, I will try to make the emulator version as close as possible to the original. First, we had an improvement in resolution. The base GTA 5 on PS3 ran at 720p resolution. The game had various jaggies and the shadows didn't work very well and was limited to 30 FPS. In the 2025 version, we can run the game in 4K with extremely sharp graphics and no jagged edges, high resolution textures, shadows that work perfectly with the lighting system, and 60 FPS. In addition to the resolution improvement, we also had improvements in shadows, vegetation, distance scale, etc. Despite the absurd improvement in graphics, the vegetation is increased, but it does not exactly go to what we would like it to be, like the vegetation that appears in the first GTA 5 trailers. However, there is a considerable improvement in all the vegetation of the game: bushes, shrubs, trees, not only in rural areas but also in city alleys. There is also an improvement in the distance scale, because when you look from afar, at least in the PlayStation 3 version, everything is in very low resolution or almost impossible to see. When you are playing in the 2025 version, it is better, it is more detailed as the distance increases. And when you look far away, you notice that the ray tracing added in this version also placed shadows on items that are far away, such as trees that originally had no shadows. This adds realism and depth to the game. In addition, in the latest version, unlike the PlayStation 3 version, you also have a higher traffic of cars. The amount of vehicles that pass on the street in the PS3 or Xbox 360 is more limited, and not only that, it is more repetitive. You can easily observe various NPCs or identical cars passing in the same place. This was done to save computational power. Several identical vehicles or characters were spawned to save memory, since it would not be necessary to load different models at once. In the following versions, this changed a lot. Both the quantity and variety of cars and NPCs on the streets became larger, making the game more realistic and diverse. When entering the loading screen in the first version, the scene transitions from one character to another, from one background to another, have a fade out and fade in. That fade out darkens and the other wallpaper appears. In the last version, instead of darkening and appearing the other. In the expanded and improved version, now we no longer have that cutout in the wallpaper. The wallpaper is complete in the background, covering the entire screen, and it looks much more serious, or at least more minimalist. It gave me the impression that from PlayStation 3 onwards, Rockstar has been making the game simpler and more objective. I don't know if everyone had this impression, but anyway, at least that's what it seemed just by looking at this loading screen. Obviously, all the artworks that appear here on the loading screen in the last version are in high resolution. In the first version, it's in 720p, while in the new one, it's full HD and 4K. And also, a very subtle detail, but one of the subscribers who sent me here, Lester's shirt in the artwork of the first version was red. However, in the last version on the loading screens, he changed it to a green plaid one, which I think is one he wears in the game. I don't know why this changed, but anyway, there will be some other changes that you will see later on that also have no clear explanation. Furthermore, before we enter the loading screen, you can notice that on PlayStation 3, we would go straight into the game. For example, when you started GTA 5, the game would already start in the loading of story mode, and then you could press or not, for example, the square button, so that you would go straight into the GTA Online session and not into story mode. However, there was no menu for you to choose what to do. Basically, you had to do this during the loading time. In the expanded and enhanced version, when the game starts, you have a menu where you will choose if you will enter story mode, if you will enter online mode, or if you will mess with something from GTA Plus. Unlike what we had in the previous version, we didn't have that time to stop and wait. This menu issue being added refers to a new feature we now have in the PlayStation 5 and PC version, which is basically being able to start GTA Online separately, as if GTA Online and GTA 5 were different things. For those who didn't understand how it works, since the PlayStation 3 version, Play 4 and computer, GTA 5 story mode and GTA Online have always been together. Whenever you bought one, the second one came along. However, in the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series version, of course, whenever I'm talking about PlayStation 5, I'm talking about the latest generation in general. And in this case, now online is a separate game. You can buy GTA Online without buying GTA 5 story mode. So I believe the need for the menu arose, which we didn't have initially, and as we can now buy only online. And this is useful for those who don't enjoy the story mode. Also, a need that existed in the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 3 version has been undone, which was every time you started GTA 5 from scratch, if you have no save game there, you were playing GTA 5 for the first time. You were required to complete at least the prologue of GTA 5 so that later you could access GTA Online. And now, starting from the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series version, you're no longer required to do the prologue. You can simply go straight to GTA Online. And just to wrap up this GTA Online matter, there was also another difference in relation to the GTA Online on PlayStation 3 that rest in peace. For the expanded and improved version, when you start a new character in the last version, you can now choose between 4 types of careers: be a magnate, smuggler, nightclub owner, and one more. And each of these careers you choose to follow in GTA Online will give you some properties for you to have an initial boost and also some money and some benefits, which in a way is Rockstar encouraging people to get into GTA Online, something it didn't do yet so explicitly in the PlayStation 3 generation. When we enter the game, I think the biggest difference I noticed right away was in the cell phones. For example, in Michael's cell phone in the first version, it has a 2D model with very poor rendering. In fact, all cell phones in the first version had terrible rendering, but this is not a complaint about the game, it is simply a hardware limitation of that time. But besides the rendering issue, the design was also sometimes simpler. In Michael's cell phone, he had physical buttons. For example, he has 2 buttons on the left side and 1 button on the right side. And in front of the screen, there is a power button right next to the iFruit. It was a cell phone very similar to the iPhone 4. In the last version, it is completely clean, much more similar to the iPhone 5, which is much more clean. As for Franklin's phone, I think it's the most poorly rendered. You can see from far away that it looks like a little piece of paper. It's all white and gray in the first version, with a button on the right side. However, in the last version, now it's a black phone, with a green edge, much better rendering, and with 2 buttons on the left side. Above, now it has the phone brand. In the first version, Franklin's phone had no brand. Now, Trevor's cell phone has a really cool difference too. Although it is poorly rendered in the first version, I don't think there is much graphic difference between the versions. The biggest difference here is that Trevor's cell phone in the first generation was rounded at the top with red icons, and in the ultimate version, it is completely straight. A square cell phone is much better rendered with different icons. Additionally, in the ultimate version, there is a crack on Trevor's cell phone screen that did not exist in the first version. In fact, this crack is quite visible if you switch to first-person view. I actually thought it was a cool detail because it kind of matches Trevor's personality of being a bit like a I don't care type of guy, you know? But overall, regarding all the cell phones, they all have improved resolution and a slight change in the size of the icons. The cell phone themes of all cell phones also changed the color of everything. First, you change the cell phone theme and it only changed the letter, and now it changes the entire layout. Also, just to finish, the cameras also had a little change here in the game. A distortion filter was removed that we had in the first version of the PS3. In addition, actions with the new characters were included in the new generations to take photos, like giving the middle finger, posing for a photo, etc. Besides the filter and actions, the camera in the first version had grid lines on the screen that couldn't be removed. In the last version, you can remove this line by pressing R1, and the image quality of the camera in the first version was lower. I believe this was not a hardware issue but something intentional placed by the developers, which in the end didn't make much sense and was removed when they migrated generations. In the pause menu, there is also a pretty big difference. In the first version, the map was all colored, differentiating urban areas in gray, forested areas in green, and a somewhat desert or desert-like area, I don't know the correct term, in light brown. The beach area also stayed in this light brown. Now in the last version, the map is all black, the icons had a slight restyling, and overall they became more minimalist. Some were changed to end up with something cleaner. Additionally, the personal vehicle icon was also added, which is not a new icon. It is the same one used in the police yard. Moving on from the map to the mini-map, there's a subtle difference, but you can notice it as soon as you enter. The first thing is that, in the first version, the map had black borders. It was more transparent and smaller. You can even see that it was further away from the corner of the screen. In the last version, these black borders were removed. The map is a bit larger, less transparent, to make it more visible, and the icons, like people and targets, also have a lighter black border, in a more minimalist vibe. In the first version, the black border on top of a target there on the mini-map was very large. Already in the new one, it's kind of something very subtle, showing that Rockstar was focusing on leaving something cleaner in the end. Well, now talking about missions. In the failure screen part, in the first version, when you failed, a very simple failure message would appear in the middle of the screen, and after the failure cutscene or something like that, the screen would simply turn black with the word failed and not during the cutscene. But in the last version, during the cutscene, the mission failed screen already appears, a black and white screen with the band behind the name where it will say that you failed the mission. And unlike what happened in the first version, this time there will be an explanation right below of what you did wrong. If you scared the family, if you killed a person, or whatever you did. Now moving on to the part of the success screen or completed mission. When you complete a mission, it would show as completed on the screen and already show your classification of errors and hits in the mission, which would be your score, gold, silver, etc. However, in the last version, now there is a band behind the written completed mission. This same band is the one that was added in the failure, death, etc. It is always the same band, and the menu where it shows your mission score, this time in the last version, it is hidden. You have to press either the square of the PlayStation or X of the Xbox to open those mission statistics and check your score. The death screen, just like the failure screen, also had some differences. In the first version, there was a black and white background with the word died simply on the screen, or sometimes it even said that you screwed up as well. In the last version, the background is black, darker like that, in the same scheme, but a detail that few people noticed is that at the moment of each character's death, whether Trevor, Franklin, or Michael, you can see the character's color, followed by black. And furthermore, the design also changes a bit, from the first version to the new one, becoming very similar to that failure screen, with a black and white filter, that black stripe, and so on and so forth. The sound when you die with the character also has a slight change. In the first version, it sounded like a simpler sound, but in the last version, it already sounds like a more extended and intense version, but it seems to be the same sound. So, I don't know why Rockstar decided to change that. Now, speaking of new features, there were two features that exist in this latest version that do not exist in the PS3. The first one is the codes by phone. So in the first version, you could enter codes just by pressing buttons like square, triangle, up and down, and so on. However, in the latest version, something that existed in GTA 4 was included, which would be entering codes on your phone. However, unlike GTA 4, you can't save these codes, but you can enter them as many times as you want. The second function that was also added in the last version that was not in the first was the first-person camera. This first-person camera completely changes the dynamics of the game. And of course, with this first-person camera, several weapon animations and other shooting elements, etc. were added to make it a little more realistic and consistent with this camera. The biggest difference, I believe, was within the vehicles that previously had little detailing. Currently, the car dashboards are functional, the radios you choose are reflected on the vehicle dashboard in real time, and the steering wheel moves when you turn the car left or right, things we didn't have in the PS3 version. In general, the vehicle interiors in the last version are much more detailed due to the first-person camera. All that part there of radios, steering wheels, everything there was restyled and redesigned so that you can use it in a more realistic way. Just like the issue of weapon animation, shooting, reloading, and so on. Everything was also improved. And still talking about vehicles, for some reason when we hit a front wheel, depending on the angle we hit, there was a rare probability of that wheel coming off when we played in the first version. It seems that the game physics was slightly altered when it moved to the ultimate version, because that no longer exists. You can still hit the vehicle and damage a specific wheel, but it is almost impossible for that wheel to come off. You can usually lock it so that it doesn't rotate anymore. This happens much more in the PS3 version because the cars released in the first version had better collision collision detailing, if you hit the cars that were released in GTA 5's first version and compare them to recent vehicle collisions, it gives the impression that the recent vehicles already come with a certain level of armor, when in fact what is lacking is collision detail. Another change we had in cars was the addition of the wheelie function. On the PS3 there are powerful vehicles that even have the wheelie support accessory in Los Santos Customs. An example of this type of car is the Sabre Turbo. However, even adding this accessory and all kinds of modifications in the PS3 version, these cars do not wheelie. Since the game was re-released for PS4 onwards, just take a car from this category, hold down the accelerator and press the handbrake at the same time, which on the PS4 and PS5 is to hold down R2 and R1 simultaneously. When you release the handbrake, the car will wheelie for a few meters. If you make modifications that improve the vehicle's performance, the wheelie will be higher and last much longer. The wheelie support is not necessary to wheelie the car, it is just decorative, and from my point of view, it even hinders a little. Moving away from cars and onto purchasable properties, we can also see a difference in the garages. In the first version, you didn't even have an entrance and exit animation. For example, in Franklin's garage, you would enter through the front gate and then exit through the side door. When you exited through the side door, you would reappear at the front gate, which made no sense since there is no side door outside of that garage, only on the inside. So maybe thinking about that, Rockstar decided to fix that when they moved on to the PS4 version and beyond. In the latest version, now we have animations when entering and exiting each garage, whether with Franklin, Trevor, or Michael. With the front gate basically functional in Franklin's garage, which had that side door that made us spawn at the front gate, stops working. Now, to exit Franklin's garage, we leave through the same gate we entered. This is a pretty cool detail that has been fixed because that door inside Franklin's garage, which leads to the side, when you go around and look outside, you see that there is nothing. Keeping the same vibe, but still talking about cars, there's a slight difference here in the police cars. Actually, in a police car in the first version, the Buffalo didn't have a grille on the front bumper. It had the word police written on the side, pretty big, and on the hood, it had a police symbol. However, for some reason, in the latest version, this Buffalo was completely restyled. Now it has a grille on the front bumper to give it a more robust look. On the side, instead of having the name police, it now has a city seal sticker and the phrase obey and survive, plus a number below. The police symbol was removed from the hood, the vehicle's roof had the number 43 added below the flex rotation, and in addition, several new stickers were added to the rear of the car. 30. Another detail is that, looking at the two vehicles from the front, you can see that the police cars in the first version did not have a visible police radio above the car dashboard. In the last version, you can clearly see the radio inside the car. This detail of the radio in police cars applies to all vehicles, from the simplest ones to the rarest police cars. A very cool detail. This radio looks a lot like the one inside the taxis in GTA 5. Now talking about cars added in the last version, in the first generation of GTA 5, we had a much more limited amount of cars as soon as the game was launched in its first version, and as they released DLCs on the PS3 itself, all these GTA Online DLCs with vehicles were passing vehicles to the GTA story mode. However, what you are seeing on the screen now is the exact amount of vehicles in Legendary Motorsport, San Andreas Super Autos, Elitist Travel, Warstock Cash, and Carry, and the boat store that I forgot the name of. When we start in the last version of GTA, which is the GTA from PlayStation 4 onwards, all these vehicles that came through an update for the PlayStation 3 are already available by default in the store for you to buy. The websites are also redesigned, making them more modern and consistent with the current era. In addition, 3 new cars are added that were from GTA 4, which are the Dinka Blista Compact, which even has a special paint job, I'll talk about that later, the Declassi Stallion, and the Imponte Dukes. In GTA 5 overall, there are more vehicles that came from GTA 4, but that were added beyond the first version to the current versions. These 3 were the only ones I noticed, but there may be more. In addition, the Duke O'Death vehicle has been added, which is through a random event, the Dodo plane, which is also through a random event, and the Kraken submarine, which you have to collect after a side mission to unlock it. And just to wrap up this car topic, they also added neon as a customizable item at Los Santos Customs for all the cars in the game, and that wasn't in the first version. Talking about music here, from what I researched and understood, 2 new radios were added to GTA 5 with a total of 168 new songs of various styles across various radio stations. I can't detail all the songs that were added here, but yes, there were several new songs, and obviously I can't play them here due to copyright issues. 36. Speaking of Easter eggs, there was a change from a face on Mount Chiliad to a chicken. Actually, it doesn't really look like a chicken, but anyway, in the first version, when you came to this part of the map, you could see a face, and this face was very similar to a character from the Breaking Bad series. But after a while, it was confirmed that it was the face of one of the Rockstar developers. In the latest version, this face was replaced by what would be a chicken. Actually, it's a parody of a chicken, or I don't know what that is. And a third thing that was added in the last version was an American flag at the Lost Camp. There was a specific trailer that started in the PlayStation 3 version with a Confederate flag. In the last PlayStation 3 version, there is no flag, and from the PS4 version onwards, there is the United States flag placed there in the same spot. On the beach of Los Santos, there was a replica of a sculpture by an artist named Mark Di Suvero. This sculpture is visible in version 1.00 of GTA 5 for PS3, and a few versions ahead. I believe that after version 1.17, this sculpture was replaced by this new version, as it seems the artist filed a lawsuit against Rockstar for copyright issues. There was also a difference in the sights and sight indicators, etc. from the first version to the new one. In the first version, the sight, besides having more black border, it turned into an X whenever you eliminated an enemy. In the last version, it basically turns into an X by default, but with a dot in the middle, also being much more minimalist, with a practically invisible black outline, while in the first version it was very visible. Missile sights like RPGs and vehicle missiles like buzzards also had changes in the sights. In version 1.0, the game came by default with the sight being just a dot for these missiles. From the PS4 version to the latest current version, the RPG and vehicle missile sights are now a half open and large square, giving more visibility to whoever is using the weapon. This sight option already existed in version 1.00 of the PS3, however you needed to enter the game's sight settings and change from normal sight to complex sight. The weapon and stats menus have also undergone some changes. For example, weapon icons have been altered. They have become slightly larger and less shiny, and some icons have actually been swapped, such as the sticky bomb icon, which I think might be the biggest difference from the first version to the new one. But I won't go into details here and talk about all the icons that had differences, but I will make it clear that yes, there were a lot of differences. Still talking about weapons, inside the vehicle we also had some differences. In the first version, when switching weapons, we could see an outline around the weapon. This outline had the color of the protagonist being used at the moment, so if you were with Franklin, there would be a green outline, with Michael a blue outline, and so on. In the last version, this part was restyled, and now when you are switching weapons, we no longer have this border in the protagonist's color. We have a larger circle, and the weapon icon also a bit smaller compared to the circle because the circle got larger. The outline on the weapon part was completely removed. Every time you switch weapons, you no longer see this outline. But for some reason, this same outline still appears when you switch radio stations, so I didn't quite understand what the deal was with this change. Still talking about weapons outside the car, we also have a small difference. The weapons menu seems smaller in the first version. At least it gives me that impression, and has a slightly lighter gray, more towards white. Now in the last version, when we open the weapons menu, the background becomes completely blurred. Additionally, we also have a slight statistics menu in the top right corner, which in the first version we even had this menu, but it wasn't so far up on the right. It was a little more to the left and a little lower. There were also some weapons that were added in the last version. When you play on PlayStation 4 onwards, you have the railgun, which is basically an electric cannon, the little axe, heavy sniper rifle, proximity mine, and a broken bottle that you can also use to poke other people on the street. There may be other weapons that were added, but from what I researched here and can remember off the top of my head, I think it was just these. And there was a weapon that was heavily modified from version 1.0 of the PS3 to the latest current version, which is the stun gun. In the first version of GTA 5, it had a charge number from 1 to 100. but after an update from the PS3 onwards, the weapon started to have a reload bar instead of the numbering. This bar is actually visible in the latest versions on the back of the weapon. You can see it perfectly while playing the game in first person. Moving on from the topic of weapons, in the latest version, we have some additional random events and side missions compared to the PS3 version. In random events, we have the event that unlocks the Dodo plane, which is in this part of the map. In this event, you must eliminate some thugs and steal the plane. After stealing the plane, just store it in your hangar and it will be yours. There is also the random event for the Juco death car, which we unlock in this part of the map after an intense chase, and there is a random event that is followed by a collectible. This collectible provides dresses and shirts for Trevor, as well as unlocking an exclusive themed car. In addition to those 3 random events that I mentioned to you, there's also a new mystery that can only be solved with Michael. This mystery, if I'm not mistaken, has 6 steps. I don't remember very well, but in the end you get 2 new filters for the game, and at a certain point in the mission you have access to Solomon Richards' office to explore freely, which is pretty cool. In addition, there were also additions of secondary missions from the PlayStation 4 version, such as the stock car races. In these races, the cars have unique liveries, and every time you win, you get that specific vehicle as a special car, which is sent directly to your purchased garage. You can win up to 5 vehicles, with the last one being the Marshall, or the famous monster truck, as well as being able to get a car like Franklin's Sports Buffalo with a special livery. We also had the addition of new collectibles from the PlayStation 3 version onwards. 27 peyotes were added. These peyotes are those fruits that the character goes and eats around the map, and then he can transform into a random animal. In addition to these 27 peyotes, for those who have already collected the 27 peyotes, there was also the addition of the Bigfoot peyote, which after collecting the 27 peyotes and doing some specific things, you can also transform into Bigfoot. I personally really like this one, but it's a lot of work. Besides the collectibles of the peyotes and the Bigfoot, you also have the collectible of the monkey photos or monkey graffiti. This collectible is basically what will unlock a random event, and this random event of the monkey collectible with the graffiti is what will unlock the Blista Gogo monkey car, plus some exclusive dresses and t-shirts for Trevor. And the last collectible added was the animal photography collectible, which didn't exist in the first version. It was also added in the new one, and after you complete the animal photography collectible, you unlock a new vehicle, which is the Kraken submarine, which didn't exist in the first version of GTA 5 back on the PlayStation 3. There's a big difference in the amount of animals between the first and last version of GTA 5. Cats were added, dogs were already there, but new breeds were added. In Trevor's house, cockroaches were added, which were not in the first generation. In addition, throughout the game, rabbits, pigeons, dolphins, whales, and stingrays were also added, which I think stingrays might be the biggest difference within the ocean from the first version to the new one. Now, speaking a little bit about the map and some specific things about the environment, in the first version there was a camp of scientists in the desert. Actually, it's not really a camp, it's a part where there are several giant satellite dishes, which is actually one of the locations for the Doomsday heist in GTA Online. For some reason, this location had a difference from the first version to the new one. When we arrived at this location on the map at 10:04 in the morning, we saw scientists accompanied by agents from the FIB, or sometimes just the FIB agents. We had two vehicles there, the DeClass Granger and a Bravado Buffalo from the FIB, which was a very rare FIB car. It had sirens and everything, and it was completely black. This is the vehicle that Steve Haynes is using at the end of the Lamar Down mission. You can briefly see it in the cutscene. 55. In the last version, now we only have the scientists in that same location. For some reason, the characters that were from the FIB were removed and even the vehicles were replaced. What were vehicles from the FIB, which were that FIB Buffalo and the DeClass Granger, are now a minivan and a burrito that are white, much more on a scientific vibe than a police vibe. Still talking about some differences in environments, in the first version we had some fences at the airport that were destructible with explosives. Actually not some, all the fences at the airport. They were destructible with RPG, grenade, etc. From the PS4 version to the last version, for some reason now these fences are completely indestructible. You can come with a tank here and barely scratch the fence. Furthermore, also at the airport, you could see planes taking off and landing every time. It was much more frequent than in today's current versions. Even on YouTube, you can see some videos of people placing cars on the runway and waiting for the plane to land on top. However, from the PS4 version to the last version, this does not exist. You can even see that big plane sometimes landing, or it's already there in the middle of the runway, but normally that's all, and you can't see it taking off anymore. Another location that had a big difference was at Los Santos Beach at the entrance to one of the tunnels. I believe they are sewage tunnels. Those tunnels in the PS3 version were completely clean on the outside. In the Ultimate version, you see dirt at the entrances, dirt, bushes, and a big graffiti or tag from the Vagos. Leaving locations and going back to talking about graphics, one point that stands out in the expanded and enhanced version are the shadows on objects and people. In GTA 5 for PS3, several objects and NPCs had no shadows. This was minimally improved in the re-release of GTA 5 for PS4. However, in the latest version of GTA 5, whether on PS5 or PC, everything has shadows. If you stop with a vehicle behind a pole, NPCs or other cars, you can see the shadows working perfectly around you, something that didn't even exist in the PS4 and Xbox One version. Another exclusive feature of the expanded and improved version are the reflections that have been completely enhanced with the addition of ray tracing. Reflections on the PS3 are almost non-existent, if not completely. On the other hand, since the version released in 2022, the improvement in reflections and shadows has been significant due to ray tracing, and with the release of the latest version in 2025, you can observe reflections in various places such as shop windows, or even in the chrome paint of the car. Reflections also appear in puddles of water, making the game extremely more beautiful in scenarios like being in the illuminated city. In the rain at night, it becomes something very different from what could be seen on the PS3. Still talking about graphical upgrades that made a huge difference, we have the issue of explosions, smoke, and fire. When vehicles exploded on the PS3, the fire, smoke, and explosion had minimal and weak effects. In the latest console version, the explosion is more impactful, the smoke is denser and has its own shadow due to ray tracing, the fire becomes much more intense and lively, even releasing small chips of items on fire as if they were paper crumbs or ember particles catching fire. I don't know the correct name for this. If anyone knows, please leave it in the comments. And this issue of fire, explosion, and smoke is not only different in car explosions. Any place catching fire will be more intense, and any smoke will also be more intense, such as the smoke you can release from the tires when you accelerate and brake the car at the same time. The difference is striking. Another point that brought a great immersion and detailing is the interaction with elements within GTA 5. In the PS3 version, the grass in GTA 5 was practically just a texture. Already in the latest version, there is grass, bushes, and so on, but it doesn't stop there. In the latest version, if you shoot at the grass, you will see pieces of grass coming loose, and each blade of grass has its own shadow due to ray tracing. And this is not limited to just grass. If you shoot at wooden surfaces, you will see wood chips falling to the ground in the same way as grass. Even areas with dead leaves on the ground have a better interaction of elements. When you accelerate on top of them, you can see them being thrown and sticking to the wall. While in the PS3 this rarely happened, and when it did, the leaves went straight through the wall as if there was no collision. It is somewhat simple, but shows the evolution of interaction of elements from the first to the current version. Vehicle windows received an animation similar to that of the grass. While in the first version of GTA 5 the windows were broken and you couldn't see where they went. Now in the latest version you shoot at the vehicle windows and can see the pieces and shards of glass falling on the hood inside the car and also on the ground outside the car, making this experience much more realistic. In addition to the graphics difference we already have, such as shadows, vegetation, etc., we also had a difference in graphic filters. Let me give you an example. In the first version, the filters were more intense and striking in Trevor's killing missions. The filter was extremely orange, especially when Trevor activated his ability. Filters like being drunk or drugged were also much more intense. If you, for example, with Michael, go to Jimmy's room and use the bong he has in his room in the first and last version, you will see that in the first version, the filter was much more intense. Reminiscent of that mission, someone mentioned yoga after Michael is drugged by Jimmy. In the last version, all of this was toned down a little and perhaps more realistic, or maybe Rockstar's idea was just to make these filters less intense. Speaking of clothing and outfits, the noose officers have been changed. In the first version, these noose officers have a slightly different outfit from the new one. The difference may be somewhat subtle, but yes, there is a difference there. And I think talking about clothes and outfits, the biggest difference of all that we have is in the prologue mission. After the prologue mission, when there is Michael's funeral, we can see Agent Dave Norton in the first version, which is PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. Agent Dave Norton was wearing glasses and his hair slicked back, very much in an old school movie vibe maybe, or I don't know. Now, in the last version, he is without those glasses and wearing a cap in a slightly more modern vibe. Another change that also happened in missions was in the mission Reuniting the Family when Michael is about to tattoo Laszlo's back or chest. That animation of controlling the analog stick had a longer duration. I noticed this because every time I played this mission in more recent versions, I realized that it went by very quickly. And somewhere in my memory, I was sure that that part of the mission was slower. Using the emulator, I was able to confirm and be sure that this part was accelerated in all versions after the PS3. In the Merryweather Heist mission cargo version, there was also a change at the end. When Lester arrives with the hospital outfit in the PS3 version, it is possible to see the taxi arriving a little earlier to drop off Lester there. However, in the latest version, the taxi no longer appears in the cutscene, it simply doesn't show up anymore, but Lester arrives at the location normally. In addition, basically all the usable sites from PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4 have had changes. Some even in the PlayStation 3 version itself, as some DLCs were released, these sites were already updated. I can't mention all the sites here, but you can be sure that yes, all the sites like Legendary Motorsport, San Andreas Super Autos, Elitist Travel, etc., all these sites have been restyled. Not all, only maybe the most used ones. And as I mentioned, many of them were redesigned directly on PlayStation 3 as the DLCs were released. Some were already restyled. It's not a drastic change, but yes, there is a difference in layout. And I think the biggest addition that brought an absurd freedom to those playing on the Ultimate version were two things: the Director mode and the Rockstar Editor, which are not present in the first generation. In Director mode, you basically have a slightly weaker mod menu where you can become NPCs from the story, you can transform into animals, play with altered weather at the time you want, the way you want, doing various extremely configurable things through this Director mode. In addition to the Director mode, you have the Rockstar Editor in the last generation that you could also use in the PS4 version, and I say you could because nowadays the Rockstar Editor is no longer available in the PS4 version. According to Rockstar, it was removed due to hardware limitations. In the Rockstar Editor, you can record your gameplay directly through GTA itself, and then entering the Rockstar Editor, you can edit the recording, changing the camera, speed, dynamics, depth of field, and various other things, which allow allowed people, when they had access to this tool, to recreate trailers such as the Forza Horizon trailer and various other things that would be basically impossible without having that game on your computer with various mods installed. So the director mode and the Rockstar editor definitely changed the game for those playing on the latest version. And last but not least, one of the biggest highlights of the last two releases of GTA 5, which was exclusive to the PlayStation 5 version of GTA 5, is the tactile feedback of the controllers. You can, in a way, now playing the expanded and enhanced version of GTA 5, feel a bit of the textures when you're driving on grass, on the beach area, when it's raining, when you're using a weapon, when you're accelerating a vehicle with adaptive triggers, etc. This is only possible on PlayStation 5 and PC currently because of the DualSense technology, something that didn't exist back in the PS3 days. 73. Just like many people don't notice these differences, many never get to see interesting facts that are very important for the narrative. An example of this is that you probably didn't realize the absurd amount of changes Rockstar makes to the map during the main story, and 99% of people didn't notice. If you want to understand better what I'm saying, click here next to the yellow arrow to see this sensational video that will blow your mind. And that's it, guys. This video ends here, and we'll see you in the next video. See you later.